folks, Rob Hannes here for the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best in preparedness information. You can find out more about the podcast at thepreparednesspodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Prepcast and like us on Facebook at Preparedness Podcast. And of course, you can always email me directly at rob@prepcast.info. Over the last podcast or two, I've kind of put out the notice that if you'd like to write an article, you can do so and send it to me at rob@prepcast.info, or if you have an idea you want to ping it off me, go ahead and send me an email about it. I have a couple articles in the hopper here that I need to get out. I got one just before the holiday weekend, and I got one, I think it was just yesterday, so I'll be getting those out on the website. So I appreciate you sending them in, and look for them soon on the website. If you have a question that you'd like me to try to answer on the podcast, go ahead and send it to me. Go ahead and email me. I have people who do that on a regular basis, and I try to get to them when I can. Some of the topics are a little bit more complex. For example, I have a radiation monitoring podcast that I'm working on, something I've been wanting to do for a while, but there's a lot of detail, a lot of information that I want to put together so all the facts are together, and I haven't actually finished that one yet. But if you have a question, go ahead and send it in. Today's topic is going to be based on a few emails that I've received, and we're going to be talking about non-firearm options for defense. Before we get into that, though, I want to talk about our sponsor for the podcast, BuyEmergencyFoods.com. When I first started advertising for BuyEmergencyFoods.com, I had some of my friends call me up and say, "Hey, have you tasted this food?" And I have, and we were talking about it, and the reason they wanted to know if I had tried it is because a lot of the storage food gives you what's called tummy problems. So you eat the food, and then you get real gassy, and you have to go to the bathroom and stuff, and it's an issue with a lot of people. These tummy problems are a big concern, and you don't want to have these sort of issues with your storage food, and it's one of the reasons that I really like BuyEmergencyFoods.com. Freeze-dried meals is because not only do they taste good, not only do they have a 25-year shelf life, not only are they lightweight so I can pack a good supply of them in my evacuation kits or my go bags, but after I've eaten them, I don't have any of those tummy issues. And to me, that's a real important aspect when I'm looking for storage food. You've heard me in past podcasts talk to my kids about them. They eat them. They like them. None of us had any of those tummy problems, and that's a big deal because even some of the items you get from the grocery store that you would think, oh, this is a freeze-dried soup mix or something, we have tummy issues with that, and I know other people that have tummy issues with that. When I'm in a survival situation, that isn't the kind of problems I need to be adding to my stress level. Check out BuyEmergencyFoods.com. If you call in and told them you heard about them on the Preparedness Podcast, you'll get 5% off your entire order. BuyEmergencyFoods.com. The topic we're going to be covering is non-firearm defensive options. And we're going to be talking about it because not everybody can have a firearm. Here in the United States, even though the gun laws are expanding, it looks like even Illinois is going to have a concealed carry law eventually. The governor's fighting it. The politicians in power, which means Chicago and the governor, are fighting hard to prevent this because they know what is going to happen. The statistics show us that when you have lenient firearm laws where people can own guns, they can carry guns for protection, the crime rate drops, the murder rate drops. And these politicians have been telling, Chicagoans, oh no, you can't have guns because it's bad for you. Well, they know that this is going to basically point them out to be wrong, if not just out and out liars. And so they're fighting tooth and nail because when a population has firearms, when they have this sort of control, then the ultimate power, the last word, so to speak, resides with the citizenship, which is where it should be, because at least in this country, politicians and Congress people and the government, they're all supposed to work for us. And when they disarm us, they basically take the control away from us. They can do whatever they want because there's really nothing that we can do about it. And I bring that up not because I want to talk politics, but because I get emails from listeners who don't understand why we Americans are so attached to our guns. And it's not because of the gun. It's not because of the guns themselves. It's not because we have to own our guns. It's about freedom. You cannot be free unless you have the ability to A, defend yourself, and B, control your government. You can't control your government if they don't give you any means to overthrow the government. If they take that all away, then the government controls you. And that's what it comes down to, plain and simple. It's about freedom. Now, having said that, I do want to cover some non-firearm defensive options because, let's face it, you can't carry a gun everywhere. If you fly, it's rather difficult to take your firearms with you. You have to pack them in luggage, so now you're worried about who's going to steal them because they slap a big old orange sticker on there that says firearm inside, which to me is telling exactly the people who handle the luggage and those who are likely to open my luggage and steal my stuff exactly which bags they need to look at. Additionally, I can't carry my weapon on the plane, which is where I would want it, because if there's an issue, then I don't have access to it. So I don't carry my guns with me when I travel on planes. It's just not worth it. And there are a lot of other people that are just like that. There are some people, as I mentioned, who live in areas that don't have guns, or perhaps they don't want a gun. Perhaps they're afraid of the power that comes with owning a weapon. And that's understandable. If you're not comfortable owning a gun, don't own one. And if you do own one, then you should get the training to make sure that you know how to use that weapon correctly, because a lot of people, unfortunately, either get injured or killed when they mishandle firearms, which makes it no more or less dangerous than when people mishandle automobiles or chainsaws or kitchen knives. I mean, they're still dangerous. So it's another tool that you need to learn to use and use safely. And that pretty much goes for everything that you're going to use or think you're going to use for defense. You should have some practice with it. You should train with it. You should know how to use it. You should know its limitations and its benefits. You can't just throw a bunch of sticks around the house and assume that you're going to be able to get to one, and when you get to one, you're going to be able to defend yourself. In short, you need to prepare to be able to use that weapon. Now, let's keep in mind why we would be using a defensive weapon. We're not sparring. It isn't sport. It isn't for fun. It's to save our lives or the lives of your family. Make no bones about it. If somebody breaks into your house, especially if they break into your house knowing that you're home, they're not there for tea and crumpets. They're there to do something bad, either to steal or to harm. And if they know you're home and they're not afraid that you're home, then they're there probably to hurt you. And it's either because they want to take you out so they can steal whatever it is and you don't call the police, or that's just what their intent is. So we need to make sure that we have the plan in place and know what to do to stop these people. And I'm going to be honest, first and foremost, a firearm is best for defense. There is no other substitute. I was looking at all the possible options, all the other weapons out there, all the other improvisation and technology that's out there. There is no other weapon out there. There's no other tool out there that is as effective as a firearm. So if you're trying to decide what you should do for home defense and you have the option of owning a firearm, then you should. And so consider these other options only last resorts if you can't have a firearm. That's how effective it is. We don't have firearms in this country because it's a sport. It's because they're effective. There is no other weapon. Now, I'm not talking military tanks and artillery and stuff. I'm talking about personal weapons. You know, we can't own hand grenades. Heck, I wouldn't want to own a hand grenade. They're too non-specific. They're too general. If I was to pull the pin on a hand grenade and throw it at the bad guy, who knows where that grenade's going to end up, and who knows who is going to be affected by that blast damage. It's not precise enough. But there is no other tool out there that allows me to effectively stop an intruder, to stop a threat from a distance. And I don't mean 10, 20 feet. I mean a distance. Non-firearm weapons have a far less range, and they are not as effective at stopping an attacker. That's the plain truth. So I don't want to confuse these non-firearm options as being good substitutes, because they're not. They are less than effective. They are something that you should use if you have no other choice. But as we've already covered, sometimes you don't have a choice and you have to make do with what you have. However, you should also be familiar with these non-firearm options just in case you can't get to your firearm. So you never know what your situation is going to be, and thus, in order to be truly prepared, you need to be able to use whatever is at hand and know how to use it. Also, as I'm covering these, I want you to understand that this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just some of the more obvious, some of the more convenient options that are out there. I'm sure there are others out there that will say, oh, you forgot this, or what if I take the wooden bar from my closet and use that as a, sharpen the edge? Of course, you can use that, of course. These are the typical ones that you probably are more likely to come across. Oh, I want to mention that you also need to know your local laws. Using some of these as a weapon can have certain legal ramifications. For example, and we'll get into this, but if you use bug spray, like a wasp killer, as a chemical weapon, you're probably going to have a lot of legal issues because, one, you're using the product that was in a manner that it's not intended for, and two, I think you can seriously blind somebody with stuff like that. So you need to be very cognizant of what you're doing. You are responsible for every action you take, and you can't claim ignorance. You are responsible. Even though the guy is breaking into your house and has intent, you still have a responsibility. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's take a look at some of these options. Edge weapons would be the first category I would look at. Those would include swords, which are tons and tons of different types of swords. These would need practice. I suppose you could take a sword that was fairly well easy to handle and use it as a slashing and poking weapon. It would be effective against an attacker who didn't know what they were doing, but I would still probably want to get some training on that to know how to wield it, because if you start swinging around and you have your family near you, you might be hitting them as well. So it is a bit of a ranged weapon, as you can extend your reach farther than you can just by extending your arm. But there's also a danger in that as well. Knives are basically, I guess, short little swords. They're a little bit easier to handle. They're not as dangerous to the people around you, but a sharp knife is still extremely dangerous. You want to know how to use that and what the dangers are. I think the next thing that might be worthwhile looking at would be a machete. These are common in landscaping and people who work outside for cutting down brush and stuff. And in fact, we've seen the machete used by the MS-13 a lot in foreign countries, like down in Mexico. They are using machetes as their primary weapon. We've seen that up here in the States as well. It can be a very formidable weapon. It's easier to use than a sword. To be effective with a sword, you really need to have some training and practice with it. With the machete, it's basically a hacking motion, which is a fairly organic sort of motion for the arm. You don't need to have a lot of training with it, and it can be still highly effective. Other edge weapons would include hatchets, axes, maybe even spears. All of these have been used on the battlefield at some point. I don't think I would really want to use an axe as a primary defensive weapon. It's not very well balanced, and I think it takes a lot of practice to use it well. But, if you have one available and you need to defend your home, then I would definitely give it a consideration. Except for the spear, the axe and the hatchet are some things that a lot of people have around their house, so it's not generally considered a defensive weapon. People are allowed to own it nearly everywhere, so there are things that you can keep around and not cause suspicion, which is important for those who want to keep a low-key profile and not attract attention to themselves. The next type of weapons would be the blunt weapons. These would be those that don't have an edge to them or a point. They are used for basically whacking people with. These are basically your sticks, whether they're organic like a tree branch or a piece of wood that you pulled out of your closet like the closet rod. In my house, all the closets use these big, thick wooden dowels. I think they're 1.5 inches in diameter, possibly 2 inches. They all come out fairly easily, and all of them could be used as improvised weapons if needed. But this also includes walking sticks, axe handles, baseball bats, canes, basically anything that's stick-like. It could be a steel pipe, a lead pipe, aluminum pipe, a piece of conduit. You know, there's all sorts of sticks out there, and man has been using sticks for like ever. And so it's a natural extension of our arm. I had a listener who, if I remember right, they were legally blind and wanted to know what they could use beyond their normal walking stick as that could also double as a weapon. What I suggested was getting an unbreakable cane. For example, Cold Steel has these sticks. There are all sorts of walking sticks and canes. And I don't know what the plastic is, but it's an unbreakable sort of plastic. You can bend it and whack it and beat on it all day, and it takes the abuse. And this is something that you can, use as part of your daily life. If you need a cane, now the hardwood canes are nice. The typical crook cane will work. I don't know how much abuse it would take before it breaks. I know it has to be able to withstand body weight, so they're fairly rugged and they're fairly durable. But you may want to look at something like these unbreakable plastic canes because you can use them as a weapon, especially those who've got the big heavy weight on top, whether it's a bigger bulb of plastic or whatever, again, that material is, Zytel or polypropylene. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but then you can use that kind of like a bat or a poking stick or a staff or something. Your old-time walking staffs, those that are 5, 6, 7 feet long, you don't see a lot of those, and I think that would probably raise a lot of suspicion if you were trying to get on a plane with those. But you could easily get on that same plane with a walking cane. I've seen that happen before. Now, you may have to not take your unbreakable plastic cane, especially if it looks sort of offensive. I mean, some of these have that offensive look to them that look like they may be more than just a cane. And those are probably fine when you're just around town, around home, whatever. Nobody's paying you any special attention like when you're getting on a plane. But those times when you're going to be under scrutiny, you may want to resort just to a standard cane. Cold Steel also makes a couple baseball bats out of the same plastic. And I've got one of these, and they're great. You can pound on this all day long. You can pound on concrete all day long with this. And you're going to chip and mar and scuff up the bat, but they're not going to break. These are good alternatives. Even the wood or aluminum bats are good alternatives. They're sticks that you can swing. They're made for swinging, heavy on one end, grip on the other. If you can wield one of these effectively, then they become an effective tool for defense. Now, the next category I call technology weapons. Some people break this up into like chemical and electronic or whatever, but they're based on technology. This would include mace or pepper spray. I don't think the mace sprays are used as much. I think most of it is pepper spray. And I would recommend that if you're going to use it for defense, unless you're going to carry it on your keychain or a small purse, get the bear spray. The big cans of the bear spray, they fog a lot better. They shoot a lot farther. They cover a wider target area. And if you're going to, again, remember, you're trying to stop an attacker from hurting you or your family. You don't want this little bitty spray that you have to kind of pump or whatever. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for a big, huge fog. And that's typically what the bear sprays are going to be. Along with the sprays are the bug sprays. I've seen a lot of forums and people suggesting just use wasp killer. As I mentioned before, I don't think it's a good idea. Unless it's a situation where you have zero choice. And I can't even define what that would be. You would have to make that choice your own. But know that if you're going to use a wasp killer and you spray that in somebody's face and you blind them, you're probably looking at a lot of legal issues with that. So you need to be very careful. Other technological weapons include stun guns, which are the guns where you actually have to press up into somebody's body and hit a trigger, and that sends a current through them that immobilizes them because it takes out their central nervous system. This is a contact. I mean, you have to get right up to somebody to use this. The other alternative is the taser, which is like a stun gun, but you fire these barbs at somebody, and these barbs have wires that go back to the gun device. Yes, it's a ranged weapon, but it's a very, very short-range weapon. And as we'll cover at the end, you need to make sure you have a backup with this. The police use these, but that's because they know they have a firearm backup. The taser is not 100% effective. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it misfires. I think they're better at that now, but still, it's not a fail-safe, foolproof option. I guess you could look at it as a biological sort of category, but you can have dogs or a dog as part of your defensive posture, but you have to know that that's going to take a lot of time. You have to work with that dog. You have to get that dog trained. You have to continually train with that dog so that they understand the commands, so you know the commands and you can work together. You don't want that dog attacking whenever. You need to be able to control that dog so they attack or don't attack or stop attacking on command. There's a lot of training and effort that goes into that. Dogs are living beings, and so they have a lifespan. They don't live as long as humans, so if you make dogs as part of your defensive posture, you're going to be continually working with a new dog, which you don't have to do if you just have a dog as an early warning system. But if you're going to use it as a defensive tool, something that you can use to protect your family with, then you have to realize it requires training and constant shuffling in dogs in and out of that position. Now, the last category I have is improvised, which is basically anything that you have at your disposal that you can use as a weapon to protect yourself, then use it. For example, rocks in a sock, or batteries in a sock, or anything that's heavy, stick it in the toe of a sock, tie a knot so it can't come out. That becomes like a mace, the old-time mace, where you're swinging it, and when you hit somebody with that, it's going to hurt. That's an improvised weapon. We've talked about sticks, a tree limb or a closet rod or some conduit pipe you have laying around. That's an improvised weapon. Kitchen cutlery, your meat cleaver, your butcher knife, your chopping knife, whatever, those become improvised weapons. Yes, they're knives, but their primary use is for culinary use, not for defensive use, but they will work in a pinch. Other improvised weapons that you may have laying around include a skillet. Doesn't even have to be a cast iron skillet. Any frying pan that has a handle that you can swing is going to hurt. Some of you may already have these in use, but the door bars, those are the bars that go underneath the door handle and use friction on the floor to bar the door from opening or make it much more difficult to open. That's an improvised weapon as well. That may be the only weapon you have if you're at the front door because of a knock or whatever, and somebody's there, you answered it and you get rushed. That may be the only weapon that you have. Know that it's there. Realize that it's something that you can use. Those big flashlights, like a mag light, you can get them in 2, 3, 4, I think even 6 D-cell battery sizes. Those can be a baton. They've got the police and military baton called the PR-24. That's a baton with a side handle. There's also a martial arts weapon called a tonfa, which is like a PR-24 but shorter. These are just modified sticks, so you can use them and you can practice with them to be more effective with them. There are other martial art weapons, but they require a lot of training and practice, so unless you know them, I wouldn't suggest them. Another improvised weapon would be a propane torch, especially one that had one of those tops on there where you push the button and it ignites. It's a close-range weapon. I mean, you have to be right up on somebody to use it, but I would think that would be fairly effective because fire hurts, and fire hurts very fast. Now, it's a dangerous weapon because you could, catch yourself on fire or somebody else or your house. But like all of these are very dangerous. You need to know how to use them. You need to be able to understand the limitations and the risks involved with using them. That includes firearms as well. That pretty much covers the breadth of weapons that you have. Now, there are other things out there. You could use a computer mouse on a cord as a weapon. Unplug it, start swinging the mouse around, and whack somebody with it. You may or may not hit them when you go to swing it. It's not very heavy, but it's an improvised weapon. A power strip. Anything that you have at hand can be used as a weapon. The idea is that you need to think about it beforehand. What do you have at your disposal? If you have a heavy ceramic coffee cup and you throw it at somebody, if you hit them, it's going to hurt. But you need to know what the follow-up is, what your follow-through is. You hit him with the cup, you may only hit him in the shoulder. Now what? You need to always be thinking what your next step is going to be. Just don't throw that cup, hope for the best. It didn't work, and now you're like, oh, darn, it didn't work. No, you have to have a plan. You need to know what you're going to do next, and your family or every person in the household needs to know what they're going to do. Now, here are some points to keep in mind. When you need to stop an attacker, honestly, there is no substitute for a firearm, even if the attacker is unarmed. The reality of the situation is, if you have a 300-pound attacker, and let's say that attacker is on drugs, and so they aren't feeling much in the way of pain. They break into a house where there is a 20-year-old mother who has 1 or 2 children who are in diapers. She weighs about 110 pounds. She has never been in the military. She has never had any sort of martial arts training. She pulls out a stick and she goes to fend off this 300-pound attacker. She's not going to win. It's very unlikely she's going to win. Even if she had a knife or a sword or any of these improvised weapons, she's probably not going to win. If she's lucky and has pepper spray and takes him down, and while he's on the ground, beats him around the head and ears into unconsciousness so she can wait for the police to get there, yeah, she may have a chance then. But let's be honest, it's not likely that she's going to be able to survive that situation. The odds for her survival go down even more when there are more than one attackers. If there's 2 attackers, 3 attackers, 4 attackers, and all she has a stick or some rocks or batteries in a sock or pepper spray, it's unlikely that she's going to be able to take them all down without getting hurt or attacked herself. In order for any defensive plan to be effective, whether it's improvised weapons, non-lethal, non-firearm, or firearm, you need to practice and train with them in order to be effective. They are far less effective if you just pick up a stick and hope for the best. I understand when somebody says, I don't want to hurt anybody, I don't want to kill anybody. That's a natural human reaction. No sane human wants to kill another human. And thus I can understand the desire to not want to hurt anybody, even when you're defending yourself. But this is a very, very delicate situation to be in, because you have to remember that these people aren't there to play tiddlywinks or have tea and coffee. You need to understand that their intent is to hurt you, to harm you. That's the only reason they're there. They may break in to steal something, but if you're there and you get in their way, they're going to hurt you. Knowing this, all of these weapons need to have a backup. When the police use their taser, they use it knowing they have their gun backup. If the person is aggressive enough to use a taser, the police are trying to use a non-lethal form because the police get so much harassment over using lethal force. Well, they don't have another option. The taser gives them that option. However, they use it because they know they have a backup if needed. You need to have the same sort of backups. Now, this podcast was about non-firearm defense options. However, if you have to use a weapon, any weapon, that means your home defense has failed. Make sure that you harden your home against intrusion. You want to make it as difficult as possible for somebody to get in. You should use many different layers to keep people out. If you have to confront somebody that's got into your home, all those layers have failed and you're looking at a last-ditch option. The other way of looking at it is if somebody was persistent enough to get through all your layers, if they broke into your hardened house, whether it was door or the window, they heard the dog barking, the alarm's going off, you say, hey, I got a gun, don't come in here, and they come in anyways, well, then you know that they're intent on hurting you, and you should have no doubts of how you need to handle that situation. I want to thank you for downloading and listening to the podcast today. If you enjoy this podcast series, you can help support us in one or more several ways. First thing you can do is you can help us get the word out and let other people know about the podcast. This helps increase our listenership and keeps the podcast strong. If you're going to shop at Amazon, you can go to the website, thepreparednesspodcast.com, and click on the Amazon banner that's on the website. You pay the same prices that you normally would in Amazon, but we get a little bit of that commission, and every little bit helps. You can sign up for an Audible book subscription by going to audiblepodcast.com/prepcast. When you sign up for the free trial, you get a free audiobook, which you get to keep even if you decide not to subscribe. If you do subscribe, you get access to tons and tons of great audiobooks. And last but not least, support our advertisers that are on the podcast and the website, and let them know that you heard about them from the Preparedness Podcast. Until next time, folks, enjoy life, keep preparing, and be safe.